Okay, we'll take questions for Coach. Who wants to start us off?
Please. Greg said that you guys talked about the 5+11 model today for the college football playoff, probably more in depth than you had. What are your thoughts on that as opposed to all this chatter about automatic qualifiers?
Yeah, there was a lot discussed today. I don't know how much the commissioner talked to you guys about. I think I would just sum it up by, after all the data and analytics, about if there were these different systems over the years, who would be left out and who would be in, whether that was a 12-team, 16 system, and it just appeared to me that there's still flaws in every system. The best system should be 16, and it should be the 16 best. And I don't know exactly how that's figured out. I think that you've got to use some of the indexes and have people, not saying that because I'm in here, probably media people that watch the most that are on it and don't have any other motives in it, and figure out the best 16 teams. Because we obviously can't play enough games over that, to be 32 or 64 or something to figure out the best. But I think as you watch this year in sports, and now baseball, softball, after men's basketball, so many dominate, whether it's the final 8 or 12 or 16 with SEC teams, and their systems of figuring that out. And I think a lot of that has to do with the non-conference amount of opponents they play. Obviously we don't have as many games, so we can't do that. Because you see, for instance, baseball, these teams that have made it this far that have SEC and conference records just a little bit over 500. So I think that would be the best way to do it. Get rid of automatics and figure out a system to get the best 16 teams in.
Lane, you mentioned during the college football playoffs before the inconvenience of the portal being open, while the team was in season, and saying, well, it doesn't happen in pro ranks. And today, Kirby commented on wanting a January window. Is that the lesser evil of having 2 windows and having the portal after April? Do you have a stance on that now in lieu of everything that's come out?
Yeah, I think there's good and bad to all the systems, whether you go to 1 window, when is that, or whether it stays 2, because there's major issues with that. So, I would be for 1, being in the January area, and then if we can't get to that and it was going to be 1, later on, I think that's a flawed system, because the kids are on your campus staying around that long, you don't know your team, and then to have 1, late spring, I think it would cause a lot of issues, and just hard to build a team that late, and hard to, kids staying around, or they already going places, for those months. So if that was the case, I would keep it more the same, where there's 2, even though there's a lot of issues with that.
You said last year you wanted to be in the video game as it would help recruiting. You're in it now, you're on the cover. Did they give you any sort of final approval over what your animation looks like?
No, I didn't remember that I said that a year ago, but
it was smart.
Yeah. So, no, it was just a neat experience going out there, and I think the picture they put out today really wasn't how we were standing necessarily, but just be standing there, and there was Reggie and then Tim Tebow, and it was really cool, and just have so many experiences with some of those players, and Denard Robinson, being in the houses of those guys, and in recruiting, and now to see them years later, it was pretty cool feeling. And my son was there, so he got experience that was really neat.
Lane, would you be in favor of keeping an SEC championship game?
I would, but but there's also so many things within that, because there's these different ideas of almost an SEC play-in, playoff part of it. I know I was criticized when I said, the championship game versus automatically being in, and playing another week, has its issues too. So a team loses its quarterback, what would have happened if they didn't play in that game. So I think that without opening up too many different things about it, like somehow the formula of how they figure out the teams needs to change. And I'm not just saying that because we lost 3 games and didn't make it. I'm just saying that because I look at these other sports and they do a much better job of figuring out the quality of the team over just the losses, and you know, figuring out the quality of wins that they have and their strength of schedule and who they play. And so I think there's so much in there to figure out, but it would be neat to still have an SEC championship if that was weighted properly.
Wayne,
Go ahead.
Wayne, you're, I mean, coach, you use analytics a lot as, you know, on the field. Like, if you're put in charge of fixing the selection process, like, what would you want prioritized or weighted the most heavily in a formula or creating a new formula? Like, how does that work in your mind?
Yeah. Like I said, I think you got to use some of the indexes, and I'm not going to pretend I understand them all and which ones are the best. But I know other sports have figured that out better than we have, and use them just because there is stuff, and the stuff we saw today on charts over the years and how teams have played, where those indexes would have had teams differently, you know, seems to make more sense to me. There's a lot of things thrown up today of over the years, especially the last year, of, you know, teams that ended up ranked up here by the committee but really hadn't beaten anybody. So it's, you know, really doesn't seem right. And I think sometimes some of the games this year, and that's not a big enough sample size probably, I think in the first round showed that.
Like when you're getting together and discussing what the House settlement could look like if approved, by the way, but you're getting together with the university and you're discussing NIL and you're discussing, you know, what a salary cap looks like. How involved are you in those conversations with your AD and other colleagues at Ole Miss and trying to prepare for what's coming in the future while also, you know, you're dealing with your own football team as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're very involved. Now we can't control a whole lot, but we're still involved a lot in the planning for if it goes this direction versus the way it's been, whether it's approved, and how to manage that. And, you know, now you're gonna somewhat have a salary cap, it seems like, and so there's a lot into that. And, so yeah, there's a lot of discussions about that.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to that. Do you have discussions with your assistant coach? Look, 5 years ago, paying college athletes, a university paying college athletes, taboo, you know, something not to be spoken of. Now, everything's about to change potentially in the next 2 months. Is that something you have to talk with assistant coaches or players about, or anything, just to maybe try to prepare them for what's upcoming this summer?
Not necessarily. We've talked throughout a lot with our coaches. I don't know, in our system, you know, our assistant coaches, you know, they're not involved in, I would say, salaries, you know, of players. They actually don't even know many of them. Do that on purpose, so they just coach them and not think, well, this guy makes this, so then he should be here on a depth chart, or he should be making these type of plays. So they don't get involved in that very much in our program.
Clayton, can you say how much of y'all's revenue sharing at Ole Miss will be allocated toward football by percentage?
Yeah, that's probably not. That's more of a Keith Carter, athletic director, to comment on that.
What's your confidence level in this NIL go and how that's gonna work?
Yeah, I don't know that I've processed that long enough. I just got out of that meeting, and their presentation on it. You know, really was the first time that I knew very much about their specific plan on it, so I don't know that I processed that enough.
Was there something that stood out about what they said that you liked, or are you skeptical that how that's gonna all be managed? It seems like a major puzzle there.
Yeah, I think it's a really hard job, and so I think with that, there's gonna be, just like all these decisions for the most part that have come out over the last few years of changes and things, there's gonna be issues with them. It seems like they have a good plan, but I just think there's a lot of unknown, just like was in NIL in general.
What
You've
did
mentioned,
you see from Luke Haas during the spring, and what do you expect for him this year?
Wasn't ready for a football question. Used to actually get those right away. Luke did a good job, really consistent player. Did really great in all areas for us in the run and pass game, and really good culture fit. I'm really glad we got him.
a non-football question. You mentioned in past years the employment model, and Danny White said last week he thinks collective bargaining is the only surefire way. Do you agree with him, or what do you think at this point with the settlement possibly happening?
Probably long term. Again, I think on all these, I feel a little bit different from year to year because things move and things change, you know, and different state laws. There's just a lot of things in this where, you know, first, so well, this is what we should do and this is how to do it. You know, even when I first said, well, they need to be employees. Well, there were issues with that too that weren't so easy. So I think there's probably got to be something like that eventually, because for a while now it's all been very player friendly with the regulations and the rules around it. Now it's going to kind of come back somewhere in the middle, but there probably needs to be, because I think you're still going to have a lot of loophole issues and problems for both sides until there's real contracts, you know, that have years to them.
Lane, you've coached a lot of great quarterbacks from your time, all the way back as an assistant coach. Can you give us a sense of the trajectory you hope for Austin Simmons? He appears to have a lot of talent, and we've seen snippets of that. The Georgia game comes to mind. Just what can he become?
Yeah, he has a lot of talent. You're right. Very arm talented. Really, just a unique prospect in general. Do what he does in baseball and come in as a freshman and strike people out in big SEC games. He's uniquely composed to do that, and then to go in the Georgia game and lose right down the field like he did. Now, it's also easier to come in as a reliever in both situations, really, pitcher and quarterback, than to now, you know, come in and be the guy. So there's a lot of work to be done with that, but he does have a very high ceiling, yes.
Questions for Coach? Anything else?
The 105 thoughts. I mean, I don't think any coach is huge fan of it, but it's the reality. Where do you kind of stand there?
You know, I didn't like when it was initially presented and, you know, basically kind of eliminating walk-ons and limiting the numbers of it before we even get into what's best for the sport as far as the quality of play, to have enough players, training camp have enough players as the season and injuries happen. That's another issue over here, why you gotta be careful of lowering that number too much and not having replacements available. But on the walk-on part of it was just really frustrating because there's so many stories, whether it's coaches in that room, great players, you know, that went on to be great NFL players, that as you start saying, well, if we don't have that, then those don't exist. And families, and it's just a really cool part of a locker room. You know, we got stories all the time every year of somebody that you don't know their name, they never play, but they just have this unique thing about them in a locker room or in team meetings, you know, or on service teams. So I just think as that came up and limiting that, one point conversations were even to go all the way to 85, was very concerned about that.
Lane, you had any conversations with Jackson Dart in his transition to the NFL? I know it's very early in the process, but just maybe talk with him. How do you think he's doing so far?
Yeah, he's doing great. He called yesterday because he's coming back for the baseball regional, and said he's really enjoying it, really liking learning everything, and doing a great job.
Anything else?
All right, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.